my producers, Rebecca O'Flanagan and Rob Walpole. I'll ask a couple of questions and then we will have roving microphones for your thoughts and comments. John, you've made, this is your third film, and your previous films, House of Death and the Stag, both set in Ireland. What prompted this change of scenery?
I spent a lot of time in LA trying to become famous because I feel like it's never been done before. Just down the years I've been there, it's probably gone over since 2004 or maybe even earlier, and I love it. And I've always loved it, and I've been there at low ebbs financially and personally, and it's always been a city that's kind of embraced me. And I've always been weirdly defensive about its reputation when I come home, because obviously the cliches, which are in part true about needing to drive and it being fast and isolating, you know, there's truth in those, but it's also incredibly beautiful and atmospheric and welcoming and weird and fascinating and haunted and all the things you want from a place that you live in, you know. So I always had in my mind that I'd like to write a film set in that city, and when I kind of came across the story or kind of began to generate the story, it kind of flowed from there, you know. So I'm always wary of people talking about love letters to cities, but I think certainly there's an element of it in here, you know. So that was kind of the wellspring for it.
And in terms of creating Sean and Ernesto, were they based on people you'd observed, people you knew, combinations thereof?
As with everything, I mean, I'm kind of open to accusations of not being a very imaginative person, because they're me, each of them, Sean and Ernesto, in the sense that you I think, pick a character or a person and then you kind of go, well, you know, give or take plot and circumstance or whatever economic status or position in the world, you kind of go, well, how would a human being react under those circumstances? And I think when you're asking that question, you're kind of asking it of yourself. You're saying, well, how would I react, you know? Because to me, that's kind of the essence of the human experience, is that, you know, when you strip away all those other things, we're just people. And so, yeah, Ernesto is me, and Sean is me, and I'm also all the supporting characters. So, yeah, there are a few different hats.
This is an incredibly rare film that successfully balances moments of great personal tragedy with really sharp humour as well, and I think and does so without patronising or belittling its protagonists. In order to pull it off, you obviously need great actors, and so I was just wanted to ask, starting with Matt, what were the pleasures and challenges for you in bringing Sean to the screen?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I think when you have a role like this, you're just so grateful that you have a director like John to shepherd you through it, and you read a script and you realize that it really cost him something to tell this story, and so you know that you're going to have to dig as deep in yourself, so it costs you something as well. I think for me, you know, you have to really take off, when you're an actor, you have to take off the judge's hat, and you really have to be the defense attorney and try to bring as much humanity to them as you can without judging them, and however ugly that may go, however you know, non-heroic that may be. Wow, I just responded so viscerally to the script. I thought it was so timely and so beautifully brought to the page by John that I just invested in myself wholeheartedly and trusted his guidance.
Alejandro, I was looking at your IMDb page earlier, and you've been acting since the late 80s, and you have 130 credits, and yet I think this is your first, you are the title character, you are the Papichulo. How does that feel?
It's something I've been waiting for. It's like they say, it's the right time. We always say, you know, it's a timing, it's the right time, it's the right people. Everything just fell in place. When I read the script, I told my manager, I said, this is magic. And it is. Again, waiting for that opportunity to shine like this. I owe it all to John. And Matt also, because, I mean, we're both up there. We're giving people, that's what you see up there. Everything, like he said, we open up our hearts to the characters, and we work with it. And to have somebody leading the way is what you have up here. Yeah.
We should take some questions from our wonderful audience. Please raise your hand, and the microphone will come to you.
So many.
Well, hold on.
Hi, I just want to say to Matt that I'm very thankful that as a Spanish speaker that you learned some Spanish, so thank you. And I just want to ask, would you change the ending, and if you would, what would you change as Sean's future?
That's for me.
That's for you.
Okay. I wouldn't change the ending because I like that it's not wrapped up in a tidy bow. You know, objectively, who knows how sane Sean is at this point, even after his recovery. But I love that they have a friendship and a relationship that can sustain everything that they've been through, but at the same time, it doesn't cross every T and dot every I. So I like that we know they're together, but we don't know in what regard, and frankly, we don't really know where Sean is. We know that we have a hero who saved him, but we don't know where we're going from there, really.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Gracias. Gracias.
One up there.
Right, fabulous, Sam, thank you so much. Just a question. Who did Matt's stunts? All the falling and broken glass. Did you do it yourself?
Sorry. Do you want to answer that? I think with the exception of the actual fall onto the table at the quinceañera, it was me.
Yeah, Matt did all that stuff. There's some stuff that possibly legally you're not allowed to have your actor perform, but
Yeah, I didn't do that stuff.
please believe us.
And you should never admit it in front of the
Never.
These aren't John Robb, so.
No.
Very courageous child actors here in all regards.
Hello.
Hi.
I'll just speak really quietly. I just want to say that was a really moving film and I cried and it was really beautiful. But a question about the story. How did you develop the story and the characters? Were they based on anyone that you knew at all?
I've always been, as an outsider, as an Irish person, we're a nation of immigrants, so we kind of spend a lot of time in other countries observing how other cultures and customs work. And as an Irishman in LA, I was always completely fascinated by the relationship between the working class Latino community and the white middle class community in Los Angeles. And it always appeared to me that on the surface it was transactional, but that something more deep than that and more emotional was being exchanged and not acknowledged formally by either party. So I'm kind of thinking of, nannies who look after children for 12 and 13, 15 years and who are without benefits or, proper employment conditions, or a gardener who's tending to the garden of a man who's lonely and old and is hanging on his gatepost talking to him for 5 hours a day while he's trying to dig up the garden. There's another level of transactional behaviour that's occurring and that isn't acknowledged. And as an outsider in LA, it always struck me as fascinating. The tension, not tension, but yeah, I suppose tension between those communities in terms of how they interact. And given the history of Los Angeles and the history of the state of California, this is a kind of a contested space for these communities, and so it's just interesting to see how they cohabit and what their relationship is to each other. And that's a very highfalutin way of just putting a story about two men on the screen, so I think that's kind of the backstory for it. As an outsider, you do perhaps have access to a perspective that is slightly elevated or different, and from there the good stuff can hopefully flow. I hope that answers it.
There's two over here.
Made a run for it there.
Hi. Thinking back to shooting of the film, is there a specific scene that sticks out in your memory? And because it's special for you or hard to do or something like that? And which one and why?
Well, I will start, but I think that each of these guys should answer. And I wonder will they chime in with my one. Do you want to go? Actually, you start, because for me, when we went rowing on the lake, I had written in the script that, writers have no interest or ability to figure out budgets. So when I was writing the script, I was like, a beautiful rainbow arcs through the sky as the two men, blah, 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 blah. And then we got onto the lake in Echo Park, and we were shooting this wide, and the guys were in the boat, and as they went through the frame, and Cathal Waters, the DP, is here, and he should get around the whole. And also, while we're talking about the lake, I would like to give a little shout out to John McPhillips, the composer, who's come here from Rome, and I think the music in those scenes is and I'm worried you didn't ask me about those, but when the rainbow came through, and that's optical, and obviously that's physics, I guess, but it was a very special moment for all of us, I think.
I have to concur with that scene, but for me, it was the one in the car where we're singing Borderline. We rehearsed it a week prior to start shooting, and that's kind of where we broke the ice for me. And John was directing the rehearsal, and that's when this man just gave his all in terms of that one moment. I don't know if I should say it, but in rehearsal we actually completed that kiss.
You go to the highest bidder.
And the moment that we shot it, that one finger coming up, going, my money. that was very special for me.
I actually low-key stalked this movie when we were done filming because it was in LA, and I took our kids to go boating on Echo Park Lake, which you can do. They've subsequently replaced the rowboats with swans, but if you're ever in LA, I highly recommend it. And I even went hiking in the area and I was like, okay, Matt, let it go. It's over, hon. Let it go. So every day was really special and thrilling, and it never felt like work. It felt like real creative collaboration, and it was joyous, I think, largely due to the fact that John leads the ship with such an open heart and a sense of humor and permission. I think that is what made every scene really fun for me.
Thank you for a brilliant film. I would like to ask, how do you decide on just how much they could understand each other, just the importance of language in the film?
That's a good question. I think for me it was always imperative that there were no subtitles accompanying the dialogue between the two men. The idea of there being kind of a lingua franca that emerges that is beyond language, I think, is so important. And that's important just, at a human level, the idea that you can look into the whites of somebody's eyes and you can figure out what's going on. So that was vital to me that it worked on that level. And then you also cast two wonderfully expressive actors who will say it all with their eyes and their faces. And when you come into the edit and you throw it up on the screen, it's only then that you realise that it has a chance of working. So it's not without its kind of I would say anxieties, because on the page it's a weird thing to read in that regard. But I'm indebted to these two men for being as subtle and expressive as they are. So yeah.
We have one here, and stay on from the back first.
John, it's great to watch the whole film without the power going off like happened last year. Just wondered if you, I was watching the film and couldn't see any similarities with the two school guys you had on last year. I just wondered if you have any similarities in the films.
Thank you. My last film, Handsome Devil, played at BFI Flair on the South Bank, and halfway through the film, the South Bank had a power cut, and so it's like the filmmaker's anxiety dream when it came to life. Unforgettable. But yeah, I think male friendship is a recurring theme in my work, and this is another exemplar of that. And I think there's superficial elements that make it seem more different than it is, you know, the location and the tone and so on. But yeah, I think male friendship is something that interests me or has done to date, you know, and the value of that between men, I think, is an interesting place to poke around in as a writer. But no, other than that, I think you're right. I mean, there's so much about it that's different, which is good, I suppose. You know, you won't get away with making the same film forever. But please come to Papichulo on ice next Christmas.
Hi guys, I love the movie. My question's for Matt. What attracted you to the role of Sean, and could you do his rain dance for us?
There actually is another dance number that we have filmed somewhere that's a slow-mo of the two of us dancing together, but we'll save that for another time.
It's the most romantic thing I've ever seen.
Not to be a broken record, but you know, it always starts with the script, you know, and I thought it was entirely unique, the story as a whole. I understood the character's sense of loss in a way, and I understood the sense of humor that the piece had. I liked that it was told in an unconventional way, and it wasn't a story that I'd ever seen before on screen. And then I watched John's other work and fell in love with it and met him and realized that we just see the world in a very similar way, and that he was going to be a joy to work with, and I guess that's where it started.
Time for a couple more over here.
Hello. I just really enjoyed that. It made me laugh and really got me in the feels as well. When I was talking that Sean does really reminds me of the episode White Collar where Neil takes the Goodnight Cinderella and won't stop talking when he goes over to the birds. But my question,
Wow.
I just have to say
That's
that. Sorry.
encyclopedic. That's amazing.
I watched it a lot. My question is, the themes of loneliness and grief are really inherent. How important are those themes for you guys? How personally do you feel they're important these days to get the message across about that makes sense?
Well, I think it's interesting because loneliness is not an exceptional state of being. When I'm thinking of people who've, you know, I've discussed this film and other films of mine or things that have touched on this idea before, and it's not exceptional. It's kind of something that everybody experiences, whether it's acknowledged or, you know, a light is shone on it in some way or it isn't. You know, it is just an elemental part of being alive, and I think it is something that doesn't have to be distinct from comedy. I think comedy, I think that's a perfect lens to shine on it and illuminate it too. So, and I think the same could also be said of grief. You know, everybody has to experience it in order to feel alive, and that's. You know, I think it's important to go into those areas and to go into them with humour and levity, and to also respect them and see what comes out. So, yeah, it's massively important. I can't think of a reason to avoid it. So.
I think last question.
I will also say, sorry, I don't mean to override, just pardon me, and maybe answer both your questions, but there is a type of loneliness that's very specific to Los Angeles, and it probably occurs in other cities as well. I only know it and have experienced it in Los Angeles, where we're busy, we're keeping ourselves active with our phones and our lives, and then suddenly it sneaks up on you how lonely you truly are. And I thought that's one of the things that I really responded to, and it's difficult to capture, but it's something that I thought John really understood in his bones, and it's one of the things I responded to as well.
And to be fair to Matt, how he plays the scenes in the hardware store with the employee, where you come to realise, or he comes to realise, that it's probably the first actual human being that he's spoken to in a number of days. You know, that's a feature of life in Los Angeles, or can be, I think. Yeah, certainly. So.
Sadly, I'm getting the signal that we have to wrap it up now. Apologies if you didn't get a chance to ask your question, but please join me again in thanking John Bomer.